My name is Richard William Richter. I go by Dick. When I was president, I worked for George A. Grant Incorporated out of Richland, Washington. Well, let's see. Dan Murphy was president right before me, and then just after me was Jerry Cox, and then after Jerry it was Joe Lavernier. That was the year where the Attorney General had decided to sue a bunch of contractors because of alleged collusion amongst contractors that started with contractors' objections to the Perkin-Coie's general conditions for mostly school construction. And we had facilitated a meeting, I think it was with the Chelan School District, to come down here and meet with us and some of the contractors to find out why they weren't getting any bids on these school projects. And, short of a long story, the Attorney General's office felt that the contractors were colluding and ended up suing a number of large contractors. And I think the AGC felt that they had some responsibility in maybe causing that perceived collusion, so they, as I recall, made a deal with the Attorney General's office to place this responsibility on the Inland Northwest chapter of AGC, and we ended up paying, I think it was about a $20,000 fine, and then had to educate all of our members and contractor members on what it means to collude and how not to. I did have one, and I wasn't able to accomplish it. We were going to try to have a board meeting in the Tri-Cities, and I just couldn't get it done. So then, trying to compromise, I said, well, let's have it in Lind. So then you guys won't have to drive all the way down to Tri-Cities, and I'll only have to drive to Lind. And I actually went into Lind and met with, I don't know if you've ever been into Lind, but there's a little cafe in there, and met with them, and they had a room. But that didn't happen either. But goals, I saw that on the list of questions, and I just can't remember. I'm sure I did, because I remember, standing up at the convention and spelling out my goals and hopes for the year, but I just don't remember. So I must not have accomplished them, because if I had, I'd be patting myself on the back, right? Well, and I guess this is good. For me personally and my family, it changed our lives. We were, I wouldn't say dumb kids from Montana, but we were naive. And when we moved to Spokane in 1975, we were fish out of water. This was the biggest city we'd ever been in, and I finally ended up getting a job down in the Tri-Cities. 75, the economy in Spokane wasn't real good, so it was tough. And then I got into the chairs, and we started going to places like Washington, D.C. and Atlanta, and we went to Orlando, and fortunately I was able to bring my family along. And I remember it was the Vice President's meeting, I think that is, where you go to Washington, D.C. and meet with the congressional delegation, and they put you up in the Willard Hotel. I don't know if they still do that, but the Willard Hotel, you look out your window and there's the White House right across the street. So the week before, my son played in the band, the Kamayakan band, and just coincidentally almost, his band was in Washington, D.C. doing a performance. So we wanted to be there while he was there, so we stayed in this hotel that was right on the edge of the good part of town and the bad part of town. So And the room was so small, the bathroom, you had to sit on the toilet, scoot your legs over so you could close the door and then scoot back over. I mean, it was the smallest room I'd ever seen. And so it's my wife and our 2 girls and my son was, being put up in a hotel, with the band. So, but I remember, looking out the street, and there was a little, it looked like a sandwich shop across the street, but these cars, these really fancy cars with, with the spinner hubcaps, and these guys would get out and they'd have purple hats on with flowers sticking out. My daughters kept saying, "Well, Dad, let's go over and get a sandwich." And I go, I don't think that we really fit in real well with that crowd. I mean, I'm not sure what's going on, but we just need to stay away from that. And I remember getting up in the middle of the night, looking out the window, and the streets were just clogged with cars, stopped in the street. And the ladies of the night walking between the cars, working the cars. And nobody stopping it. And I mean, my eyes are like, I had never seen anything like that. And I thought, well, I suppose it's something they can't stop, so they just allow it to happen and keep it contained. But in the morning, you wouldn't have never, I mean, there was no garbage on the street, everything was back to normal. And so we stayed in that hotel, and I mean, it was nice, but it was small. And then we get in our rental car and we drive down to the Willard Hotel, because now we're gonna stay there for, I don't know, however many days. We get out, we got our suitcases in our hands. They come out and they grab them, right? And then, we're naive. Well, do we tip this guy? How much do we tip him? And we're just kind of freaking out. And my girls are just loving it, right? Because they're little princesses anyway. So, and they take my car. I go, what the hell? How do I get my car back? I need my, if I'm going to go anywhere. So anyway, I was kind of worried about that. This is how, I'd never had valet service in my life, right? I'd always had to find a place to park my own car. So we go in there, get the room, go upstairs. I mean, it's not a room. I mean, this thing, it had a bathroom that was probably bigger than the hotel room we just come out of. It had a sitting room. It had a separate bedroom. It had a huge TV. It had windows. You'd look down, you could look right onto and my girls are just jumping on the bed. And so we're hungry, and call down to the desk, and and they said, well, there's no food service right now, but we can order out for you. And they say, well, do you have pizza? And I say, well, what kind of pizza would you like? So we don't even have to call for no, we'll call for you. So we order pizza, and they bring it up on this cart with a linen tablecloth on it with this pizza box, I can't remember, from some pizza plate, and they had plates and some waters and brought it in. And I mean, it was just like, holy smokes. I mean, we were like kids in a candy shop. It was crazy. Well, it was good. I mean, I saw the question on that you'd sent down. I went back and looked, and we had a decent year that year. Tri-Cities was always kind of insulated from the real world just because of the amount of money they spent at Hanford. So when the rest of the country wasn't doing as well, it seemed like Tri-Cities always did well. I mean, there were some times, I think it was probably just like up here, the late 70s, early 80s, when things were just, really slow. But no, it was good. And I think that's probably one of the reasons I was able to, be away for, in my case, for 2 years, and travel around and come up here, at least on a, probably a bi-monthly basis, and yeah. Let's see, Carolyn, Ken, the accountant, John Sander, he was here. Still doing the books, which is a little different than the way we do it now. So that's kind of how I remember. I just remember it really did kind of have a family type feel to it. Maybe more so when Merv Cedarblum was here, but you know, it was just always a comfortable place to come. I mean, you'd walk in, people always say hi to you. They still do. It's not any different now. It may be better, but it's just a comfortable place to come. So I just have really great memories of the staff and just how willing they are to support you. I mean, they get it. They realize that their goal or their role is to support the members, and they do it with enthusiasm, and it's just a good attitude. It was almost by accident. So my wife had a degree in microbiology, and she wanted to be a medical technologist, and she applied for a 5th year, and she was accepted to St. Luke's Hospital here in Spokane. So my intent was to go to graduate school. I wanted to get a master's in hydrology, and really hope to go to work for somebody like the Bureau of Reclamation or somebody like that and do watershed studies and that sort of thing. So that was the direction I went. But because my wife came out here and we knew we were going to be in Spokane for a year at least, kind of put that on hold. And as I recall, and probably the people that remember Spokane in the 70s, it seemed pretty slow. And I had a degree in civil engineering, and so I felt I'd be an engineer of some type. So I started going around to engineering firms around Spokane, sent out a lot of applications, and it was either I didn't have any experience or I didn't have an advanced degree, so I just couldn't get a job. So we're living on the corner of Maple and Dean. Even back then, it wasn't maybe the nicest part of Spokane, but it was a 4-plex, and there was four people, 4 groups living there, and I mean, we were a bit of a family, took care. I remember we used to have a lot of Thanksgiving dinners, so that was good. And so I started doing odd jobs. I'd go down to an employment agency downtown here in Spokane, and I'd sit on a bench, and I don't know if you remember the show Taxi, and the guy behind the cage. Well, this is kind of how this place was, and I'd be sitting there, and it'd be me and some older gentlemen that probably were just looking for enough money to buy a bottle of wine. So I was fresh meat, and so this guy go, "Hey kid, I got something for you to do." And the first one I got was at Thermoguard, unloading a boxcar of insulation. It was awful. It was Spokane summer, it was hot, go home at night, itch. And then the next one I got, it was working for Thermoguard, and they were putting Visqueen around a built-in place cooler, and I was sealing all the laps with like black mastic. It was. But every day I'd go up and I'd grab a newspaper and I'd look at the want ads. And I finally, got somewhat desperate and went and engaged one of these employment agencies. And the ad read, civil engineer wanted, no experience necessary. Apply at Acme Employment Agency. I don't remember, that probably wasn't the name of the place. Well, that fits me to a T. And I mean, we're starting to get desperate, right? Because I'm working these odd jobs. My wife's, she's eating like a queen because she's eating at the hospital, right? That was part of the deal with her education. But so anyway, I'd answer this ad, and you have to basically sign your life away, or they won't tell you who it is. As it turned out, you had to pay them your first month's salary as your fee for them to do that. And I thought, well, what's another month? I'm not making any money anyway. Get in my car, me and my wife drive down to the Tri-Cities, and never been there before. I mean, it's a shocking place. I mean, when you drive down there, it's like, there's nothing there. It's hot, there's no trees. We're from Montana. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we can't live here. So I go in, George Grant Construction, and interview with their estimator for about an hour, and then I go down and meet Mr. Grant, and I'm all pumped up. I mean, I got my grade point average and all this stuff, and I'm kind of bragging on that, and he's going, no big deal. But then there was I think it was called Tau Beta Pi or something. Anyway, it was an honorary fraternity, and I mentioned that. And he had been that back when he went to what was then Washington State College, and he was more intrigued about that than anything. And so I left the interview, didn't feel one way or the other, got in my car, drove back up here, and just as we pulled into the driveway at our house, I heard the phone ringing. I mean, there were no cell phones back there. And I go running up the stairs and answer the phone, and it's Mr. Grant. And he says, well, if you want the job, you can have it. And I said, well, absolutely, I do want it. And he says, well, can you be here Wednesday? This was on a Monday. And I said, well, I don't know if I can be there Wednesday. And he says, well, get here as soon as you can. So we made arrangements. What we had to do is get another car because my wife needed a car. So borrowed some money from my folks and drove down to Tri-Cities and went to work for George Grant in July of 1975. So I guess, as they say, the rest is history. I mean, like anybody, you're too many to remember, but the ones I do remember is George Grant did a number of joint ventures. And the first one we did was with Mountain States Construction out of Sunnyside. Henry Stampshire and George Grant were good friends. And I think Mountain States was an AGC member, and that's where they may have met. Anyway, they were going to build a facility out at the Fast Flux Test Facility for, I think it would have been with J.A. Jones Construction, I think, at that point. Big job, about $30 million. And we worked jointly on the estimate and put that price together and bid it. And I think it was Mountain States Grant was the joint venture. Peter Kiewit and I think it was Wright Schubert Harbor. Butchered a little bit, and we were almost $2 million low, and which was kind of shocking. And we got together, looked at our estimate, and thought, we're okay. I think just Kiewit and the other contractor, they're just not used to working at Hanford, and they just don't understand the job as well as we do. And it's a big job. I mean, big poured-in-place concrete structure, and all we were doing is building the building. The mechanical, electrical was another contract, and it went well. And I remember at the end of that, Henry Stampshire came down and walked into George's office and threw an envelope down on the desk. The way that, just the way you'd see these old guys do it, right? Throws it down on the desk, and George kind of, what's this? And he opens it up. Check for $1 million was his half of this joint venture. And I remember George said, well, let's go over and have a drink. And there was a bar across the street from the office. It was called the Council Club. It was in the bottom of it's called the Labor Temple, and it's the labor group that does the maintenance out at Hanford. But they have this bar in the bottom of this Labor Temple. I mean, it was dark. I mean, it was everything, dark. It smelled bad. I mean, you could smoke in bars then. We go over there, and George got this $1 million check, and we're down there, and he's drinking and bragging about this. It was classic with his buds. So we did, that was a great job. And then we did another one. It was the EMSL, Engineering Molecular Science Laboratory, and that was with P&L Battelle, and that was a joint venture with Apollo. In fact, that's where Apollo Inc. started. Before that, it was just Apollo Sheet Metal. And anyway, George and Bruce Ratchford got together, which was really weird because they basically hated each other. But what had happened there is we were going to bid that on our own, and it was about $62 million. I mean, huge job for George A. Grant at the time. And our bonding company at the time, and I won't mention who it was because that'd be mean, but they kept saying, oh, we'll get the bond, we're going to get the bond, everything's good, blah, blah, blah. I mean, George had signed his life away, I'd signed my life away, I mean, and our kids' grandkids, and I mean, we'd done everything we possibly could to get this bond. And 3 days before this job bids, and I mean, I had worked my fanny off. I mean, it was a big, big job. I mean, it's offices, it's labs, I mean, it's a complicated job. And 3 days before I was going to bid, bonding company said, no, we're just not going to be able to get the bond. And that's when George called Bruce, who was a person of means even back then, and he says, well, my bonding company is a little more aggressive than yours. I think they'll go ahead and bond it. And they came up with it in 3 days. Needless to say, we switched bond companies after that. But, and that went really well. It's an interesting story on that one too. That the EMSL was going to be down by the river, and it had kind of a daylight basement layout. And but there were no Indian artifacts along the river. They dig them up all the time. And if it were a private job, and you know, you wouldn't really do much about it. You'd get a hold of, you know, the tribes. They'd come. They'd relocate them or something. But being it was government, I mean, we had I guess it would be a archaeologist or somebody, but it was a lady that was following the scrapers around. Anyway, I think it was like 12 hours into the job, we dug up an Indian grave. Stopped the job. So anyway, short of a long story, they ended up, P&L Battelle gave or deeded some property to DOE, and they ended up building it over on the P&L campus. But that job turned out really well. And then the other one I really remember that was a great job, best joint venture that we'd done, was the PSF, Physical Science Laboratories, with Leidig Grant joint venture. That one was, I think our bid was like $122 million, and they only had $95 million, and we were the only bidder, and anyway, we were able to negotiate that. But I tell you what, I can't say enough nice about Larry Schwartz and Ken Schwartz and Vince and the whole Leidig crew. I mean, it was just a pleasure. I mean, it's like one of the ones where, you know, you start out the honeymoon, and then you get into it, and by the end you're divorced. I mean, this one just went well, clear to the very end. It was, and that job did real well. But you know, we worked real hard on that one. So that's the three big jobs that I remember that I'm really pretty proud of. For us, and for George, and that's the reason that George Grant belonged, and I believe the reason DGR now belongs, is it's important to support a group of like-minded people. And lobbying, you know, to be able to lobby on the national level, to be able to lobby on the state level, and even somewhat on the local level is so important, because I think a lot of people see businesses as successful, and that they should be willing to share that success with everyone. And I think for the most part, most business owners are willing to do that. But to be forced to do it, you know, through taxes and regulations, and you just have to have somebody look out for you to be an advocate for your organization. I think it's a responsibility of every company should belong to some sort of group that supports their industry. The support is another reason. Safety's huge. It's becoming more and more important all the time. Most companies anymore have safety professionals on staff. Back in the day when Jay was here, I mean, and then now Kurt, you know, to be able to tap into that knowledge, and you just can't know everything, and they spend, you know, all of their days concentrating on safety. And most, at least back in the day, I mean, that was kind of a secondary responsibility for one of your project managers was safety, and so all of the research that they do, I mean, look at this COVID-19, all the alerts and the research that AGC did to try to navigate everyone through it. And the other thing is the collaboration and the cooperation between contractors. And you don't see that in other organizations where, you know, I'm sitting down with a group of, you know, people in a room, and we are our fierce competitors. You know, I want that job, they want that job. I don't want them to know my secrets. They don't want that. But they're willing to say, hey, I've got this procedure, or I figured this out, and I'm willing to share it with you, you know, to help you out. And it's pretty amazing. I mean, that you can do that. I mean, that spirit of cooperation and support for the industry that goes beyond the selfishness of competitive bidding is really amazing to me. And the social thing, I mean, you gotta love the social thing, the golf tournaments, and you guys come down to the Tri-Cities for the boat races. Not this year, but maybe next year again. Meetings you have up here, the barbecues and that sort of thing. The golf tournaments are amazing, and just getting together with the guys and, you know, having some food, having a few drinks, having some laughs. I mean, that helps. So, education. I mean, I'm just kind of giving you the AGC brochure, but it all works. I mean, you can't possibly know everything that you need to know to be in business. And when you have an organization that does the research and gives you the highlights, I mean, it almost gives you a priority. I mean, you have to do this, you should do this, and it would be nice if you did this, but you have that priority because, you know, time is a precious thing, and AGC is able to, you know, to do the research, sort out the critical from the important to the maybe optional. That's really good. We are the AGC.